I had this 7¼ inch Ryobi miter saw, and when I got it, I was using it on a little plastic table, or I was using it on the floor like I've seen on YouTube. But I decided I needed something better than that. So there's this guy on the internet, Fix This, Build That. He had these plans for a miter saw station that rolled around, and it opened up with side wings so that you could put long objects on it. So I decided to build my own, and this is how I did it. So this is the drawing that Fix This, Build That had created, and I like the looks of it, so I got the plans, and I got some of the hardware and the 2 sheets of 3/4 plywood that he recommended. And if you happen to have the plans, you can follow along. In the yard, I set up some rollers and sawhorses, and I started cutting the plywood. Here, I've got all of the pieces cut, and I have drilled all the pocket holes, and I'm using the glue and the Kreg pocket screws to put the thing together. And at this point, I've got the main box completed. Next, I put it on its feet, and I needed rollers. Now, what he had done is he had rollers because he would pull his out away from the wall, straight out. My shop is I pull it away from the wall sideways, so I bought these fixed rigid casters that roll only in one direction. And that allowed me to pull it out and slide it back, and it didn't move all over. Now this top area right here, this is where the saw is going to set in. The image shows you right there where I'm looking at. So to do the feed table, I cut all the little pieces. There's the top, and then in back, those little pieces, those are the reinforcing pieces. And again, on the image, it shows you where I am. And then there is one of the side feed tables is attached to the base with a piano hinge, and I built one for the other side. And the idea is that when you're not using it, it swings down and it's out of the way. Now, to hold up those side feed tables, you had to make wings. So there's the wings. On the image here, it'll show you what they are. You swing them out into position, and then on top of that little block at the end, there is a threaded hole with a bolt. So you run the bolt up and lock it in position, and then when you swing it around and it catches the outfeed tables, it goes into a little hole so that it locks in. And when you adjust the height with that bolt, that allows you to have a perfectly flat feed table. And with both sides out, you can see what I'm talking about. And I've got the saw in place and got it shimmed so that it is level. Any boards coming in from the left or the right has to be at the exact level of that saw. And the fence on the saw has to be in the exact alignment of the guide rails on those feed tables. Now, to attach the saw to the main case, I bought these knobs and bolts. Had to get longer bolts, but I wanted the knobs so that it would make it easy to remove the saw if I needed to. Now, here's a shot looking straight down the feed tables. So you can see it's perfectly straight and perfectly level. And with the saw removed, I'm getting it ready to paint. Now, I had a lot of that yellow ochre paint from when I was doing the farmhouse videos, so I decided to just paint that with the ochre instead of buying a new color of paint. I did not touch the feed tables other than put just a coat of shellac on. And on that guide rail of the feed tables, I built this little stop block. That was something that Fix This, Build That didn't have. So it was basically 2 pieces of the 3/4 plywood and a piece in the middle that's the same thickness as the guide. And then using those knobs, I can loosen it or tighten it. And when it's loose, you can slide it to wherever you want and then tighten it down. On this image, it shows you exactly where in the drawing I use this Starrett stick-on measure tape so that I wouldn't need to take a tape measure. I could just go off the guide tape. It made it easier to make repetitive cuts. And then in the shop, you can see I don't have a lot of room. So when it is pulled away from the wall and both feed tables are extended, it goes from door to door. There's the other side from the gray door looking back into our mudroom. And then with the right feed table closed down and slid up against the wall, I have just the left feed table. So it gives me a little bit more room, but there's times you got to have all that room. Now, for the dust collection, I went beyond the original fix this, build that drawing. I got this 2.5-inch adapter that goes on the saw, and then it's got the reducer end is 1.25 inches because my shop vac is 1.25 inches. And you can see how the hose just curls up and then down, and it goes down in back. And here's a close-up where I've got this special elbow from ProTeam. It goes straight into the lower section of the cabinet where I have my Home Depot bucket head. And to quiet the bucket head down, I bought this 1-inch air dryer muffler and screwed that into the exhaust port of the vacuum. And then in the bottom part of the cabinet where that bucket head resides, I got some 2-inch thick rock wool, and I covered the entire walls and the floor and the ceiling to cut down on the noise. And here's another addition that I made. This DGC Products. It's an auto start stop switch that you plug your tool into the upper plug and your vacuum into the lower plug. And when the box senses power draw, when you've started your saw, it turns the vacuum on. And when you shut the saw off, it continues to run the vacuum for about 10 seconds or so, and then it shuts the vacuum off. So that takes care of a lot of the sawdust that the saw creates. One final thing that I added beyond what Fix This, Build That did is this little short hose that if I pull the hose off the saw and plug this in, and then I start the saw for just a second, it gives me 10 seconds or so of vacuum, and I can take that crevice end and I can vacuum up any sawdust that happens to be laying on the saw or around the cabinet that didn't get picked up when the vacuum was running, when the saw was running. So that helps me clean that area up. So that is how I built my Fix This, Build That miter saw station.